Hey everyone, in this video we will build probably the most basic Django Channels example project possible. There were some of you asking about adding Django Channels tutorials or adding channels to the social media app, but before jumping into some more advanced projects like that, I want to make a video going over some basics of channels to help make those more advanced projects easier to follow along and easier to understand. So in this video we'll build a simple app that counts from 1 to 0 automatically and updates the page without refreshing. And then once it's 10, it will go ahead and just restart back to 1 and keep going like that. We'll need to change a lot from our standard project, so there'll be lots of new ideas and different concepts in this. So let's go ahead and get started building this project. So first thing we're going to do, open up a terminal, and we're going to go ahead and create a virtual environment. So I already have virtual env installed, so I'll use that, virtual env to create that virtual environment. I'm going to go ahead and activate it by using source env/bin/activate. And this will be different if you're on Windows, but for Mac and any Linux operating system, this should work fine like that. And let's go ahead and install Django. So we'll do a pip install Django. And we're also going to install channels as well. So we'll do a pip install -u channels. And now with that installed, we should be ready to go. So first we'll create a new project. So we'll do a Django-admin, and we'll do start project, and we'll call this one just basic. And there we go, we have that project created. I'm gonna go and clear the terminal to make this less messy. Let's go and cd into basic. And right here we have our manage.py. We'll go ahead and we'll create an app. So we'll do Python 3 manage.py start app, and we'll call this one, I guess, counter. It's fine. Now let's go ahead and migrate the changes. So Python 3 manage.py migrate. And now we should be able to run the server and make sure everything's working fine. So we're on server. We'll jump into a browser here, reload the page, and there we go. Now we have our basic initial Django project running. So first things first, to set up and use Django channels, we need to make some changes. So by default, Django uses this WSGI file to run the application. But you also see here, we have an asgi.py file. ASGI is what they call the spiritual successor to WSGI. And what these do is they create a Python standard for compatibility between web servers, frameworks, and applications. But one thing that WSGI does not have that we have here in ASGI is we have the ability to run asynchronous code. So when we run Django channels, we want to be able to run it asynchronously instead of just synchronously, how you would normally run a Django application. And because of that, we're going to go ahead and make some changes so we use this instead of the original one. So instead of our settings.py here, what we can do here is we can go ahead and copy this line and put it right below here, and then change the W's to A's. So ASGI right there, and then right here, ASGI. And now Django will run this in our server instead of this. Now with that added, let's go ahead and add our apps to our installed apps. So up here, I'm going to go ahead and first add channels, add a comma, and I'm also going to add the counter app that we created as well. I'm going to save both of those. And now if we go ahead here to our server and we stop it, we just go ahead and rerun it, you'll notice now it says starting ASGI/channels version 3.03 development server at localhost 8000. So now we are clearly running the other server instead. So if you see this right here, you know that everything is set up correctly and you're ready to run and write any channels code. Now this file here, this ASGI file, is not set up how we want it yet. We add some more config here for channels. So let's go ahead and add that right now. So the first thing we'll need to do is we need to import a couple things. So below this Django core, we're going to go ahead and do a from channels dot routing import something called protocol type router. And what this will allow us to do is allow us to have multiple different protocols. So something like the HTTP protocol, which is all we used before, we also want to use WebSockets as well. And so this protocol will allow us to handle both of those on our web server. So what we'll do here with this protocol type router is we'll find this application equals line, and we're going to go ahead and move this to a new line, and this will equal an instance of the protocol type router. And as an argument, you pass in a dictionary. And here we can pass in different protocols we want to use. So first we'll set up HTTP, and we'll set the value of this to be the get asgi application right here. So we'll go ahead and put this right there, and we'll put a comma right there. And we'll come back later and we'll redo some of this or add a line to set up WebSockets. But for now, this is all we need. So now with this set up, we can go ahead and start building our application. So the first step will be to build our regular Django core files that we normally do. We need a view, a template, and a URL pattern to show the index page. Because right now, all we're showing is this page here. We don't want to show this. So to get rid of that, we can go ahead and jump into our counter app. We'll go to our views first, and we'll create a new view. And this will be like our other projects we've done before. So this should be pretty familiar if you've seen the other videos. But what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and first import our generic view. So from Django.views, import view. Next, we can go ahead and create a class. I'm going to call this index. We'll pass in view right there. And we'll go ahead and add on the get method. So we do a def get, pass in self, and request. Now, what we'll do here is we'll create a context. And we'll put just, I guess, count, set that equal to, for now, we'll set to hello world as an example. And then we'll go ahead and render a template. So we'll do return render, and we'll render requests, and we'll pass in counter / index.html, and we'll pass in our context as well. Go ahead and save that. And that's all we need for our view. All we want to do is just pass in something in our context called count, and we want to go ahead and render a template. Let's go ahead and create that template real quick. So we'll go ahead inside of our counter app, we'll create a new folder, and we'll call this folder templates. Inside templates, we'll create a new folder, and we'll call this one counter. And this is just typical normal Django file structure here for our templates. So if you're familiar with that, you should know what this is already. We'll create a new file here, and we'll save this as index.html. And here we can go ahead and create a new HTML file. So I'm gonna go and write this from scratch. Let's do doc type HTML. And we could use a base template, but for this example, there's really no reason to. It's a very simple one-page thing here. So we'll just go ahead and just put it all within our index file. Create a head. Inside the head here, we'll go ahead and put some meta tags. I'm gonna go ahead and copy these over. Just kind of basic normal meta tags we'll have in a template. We'll paste that right there. And all this code will be in the description if you want to go grab those as well. Let's go ahead and add a title as well. So we'll do a title, and we'll put real-time Django Channels app, I guess, org for this title. And we'll go to close off the head, and we'll open up a body. Inside the body, for now, all we're going to put in here is an H1. We're given an ID. We'll set this ID to number. And inside of here, we'll pass in count. So right now, this will say hello world, but once we actually get the Django Channels code running, this should eventually change to be the number that's currently on, and will change every second when we update the number. Now we're going to close off the body tag and close off the HTML tag. And that should be it for our basic template. We'll go ahead and save that. Now let's go ahead and create a URL pattern. So what we'll do here is we'll go to our base or root URLs right here, urls.py. We're going to go ahead and import include, and we'll go ahead and include another file for our app URLs. So we'll do a path. This will be just empty parentheses, and we'll do include, and in quotes we'll pass in counter.urls. We'll go ahead and save that. And now inside of our counter app here, we can go ahead and create a new file. We'll save this as urls.py. we'll go ahead and import, or from Django imports, or from Django.urls, import path. No, path. We'll do URL patterns equals a array here, and inside of here, we'll go ahead and add a URL pattern. So we'll do a path. This will be our just our index page. We need to go and import index as well. So we'll do from.views import index. And so what we're doing here is we're going to our counter views and we're grabbing the index, and we can go ahead and pass that in here. In case you don't know, this dot just means go to the current directory. So in this case, it just finds the one in the current directory, which is right here, and it can find this index view right here. But back here, let's go ahead now and use the index view. So do index, and since this is a class-based view, we need to do dot as underscore view. And we're going to give this a name equaling index. Go ahead and save that. And there are our URL patterns and our view. Let's go ahead now and just reload this page. And it looks like we might have an error somewhere. There we go. And reset the server, and there we go. So now we have hello world showing up right here. Now the goal is to take this hello world, replace it with a 0, and then a 1, then a 2, then a 3 every second until we hit 10 and have that count start over again. So to do this, we need to add some Django Channels code. So in Django Channels, they have some different terms, even though a lot of this is similar to how the core Django structure is. So instead of having a urls.py, we'll have what is called a routing.py. And this will hold our WebSocket paths. So let's go ahead and create that first. So create a new file. We'll go ahead and save this as routing.py. So what we're going to do here is we want to create pretty much a URL pattern, but we want to create it for our WebSocket. So what we need to do is just import path like we normally do. So from Django.urls import path. Now down here we can go ahead and create some more URL patterns. So I'll just go ahead and do WebSocket URL patterns equals a empty list right here. And now inside this list here, we'll create another path, just like we do for a normal URL pattern. I'm going to pass in ws/counter with a trailing slash. And then like we do for our normal URLs, we need to pass in some sort of view here. But in Django Channels, they call it consumers. So we have routing, which is the same as our URLs, and we have consumers, which is the same as our views. And right now we don't have a consumer made. So I'm just going to type in our consumer right now, and we'll go ahead and create it in just a second. So I'm going to type ws consumer, and then since this is a consumer here, we got to put dot as underscore asgi with parentheses. Let's go to import that right now. So we do from dot consumers import ws consumer. Now this file doesn't exist yet, so let's go ahead and create that file now. So instead of our counter app here, we'll create a new file, and we'll save this as consumers.py. And now we can create our consumer, which is really just the same as a view. So first we'll import JSON. Then we'll go ahead and import, or from time import sleep. And then we'll go ahead and from channels dot generic dot WebSocket import WebSocket consumer. Now it's going to create that consumer. So we'll do a class ws consumer, which is the same as what we put over here. So we're creating, all we're doing is creating this right now. It's ws consumer. Create a class ws consumer, and we're going to inherit from this WebSocket consumer, which is like a generic consumer, pretty similar to our generic view that we used here. It just gives us some functionality that we can override. In this case, we override the get method. We'll override different methods here for our consumer. So we'll pass that in here like we do for our views. We'll pass in socket consumer. And now inside of here, we can go ahead and override a method. So in our views, we override a get method, but in this case, we have different methods, and the one we want to override right now, so this is just a basic example, we'll just override just the connect method. So we'll do a def connect, pass in self, and now we can go to write our code here, what to do when we connect to this WebSocket. So what we'll do first is we'll do a self.accept, just accept the connection. And then we'll go ahead and put our logic for our counting. So first we'll create a variable called count, set that equal to 0. And then we'll do a for I in range, and we'll do a range of, I guess, 1,000 will work. This is just an example, so we're just going to keep a loop going just to make this easy to do for this basic example. And we'll check if the count is less than 10. If it is, then all we're going to do is just increment it 1 and send that. So we'll take the count, we'll do a plus equals to add 1 to it. Plus equals 1 to add 1 to it, I should say. And then below that, we'll do a self.send. These are built-in functions to this that we can call to either accept the connection, send data to the front end, or whatever else. So the self.send will send some data for us. And what we want to do here is we want to pass in a JSON.dump s. And inside of here, we'll go ahead and pass in a dictionary, put message, put a colon, and we'll put count. So we're just taking this count variable, we're passing in here. So first it'll be 1, then it'll be 2, then 3, and then 4, up until it hits 10. And once it's 10, it'll skip this, and we'll go ahead and do our next thing. But before we do that, there's one line I forgot to add here, which is sleep. So we want to add a 1-second pause for each number. But back to this though, if we go ahead and get to 10, then we'll jump down here in our else statement, and we'll go ahead and set count equal to 1, and then send that value. So you'll self.send. And once again, a JSON.dump with put an S there, and then we'll go ahead and pass in a message, colon, and a count. And then once again, we'll do a sleep of 1. So we're taking our value here, and we'll send 1 in this case here, and then I'll jump back here. It's less than 10, it is, and then we just have 2, and we'll send 2, and then we'll send 3, etc. until we hit 10 again, and it starts over. And that is it for our consumer. So we can go ahead and save that file. Let's go and double check, make sure everything's working. Just come here, reload the page, and it looks like everything is, so that's good. And now that we have our routing and our consumer set up, we're almost ready to add the changes to the front end. But there's one thing we need to do is we need to add some code back to our asgi.py file to handle these WebSockets. So right now, all we handled was HTTP. Let's go ahead and handle adding WebSockets as well. So before we do anything else, let's go ahead and import a couple things. From our routing, we'll need to import URL router. And then from channels dot auth, we need to import auth middleware stack. Like that. We also want to import our WebSocket URL patterns. So from channels.routing, import WebSocket URL patterns. I believe that's how what I called it. Let's double check that. Instead of our routing.py, it was WebSocket URL patterns. Copy that, come back over here, just double check, and we'll paste that right there. Okay, so now we have those things imported. Let's go ahead and add a line for a WebSocket. So we can add another key here, and it's just called just WebSocket. And then we can go ahead and set this equal to auth middleware stack. Inside of this, an argument we can pass in is URL router. And then inside there, we'll pass in our WebSocket URL patterns. So all this is really doing is just some built-in code, makes this easy, is this will authenticate the user. Then we'll have our URL router, which will route the current request URL pattern to the correct view from our WebSocket URL patterns list. And that should be it for that. Let's go ahead and save that. Double check again, make sure everything's still working. It looks like it's not. Let's stop the server and just try rerunning it. Looks like there's an issue here with something. Oh, I put from channels.routing. That's not right. it should be from counter.routing. We want to go to our counter application and find the routing.py, and this has our WebSocket URL patterns. Let's go ahead and save that, and we'll save this. Now let's go ahead and try rerunning that and see if it works. Yes, there we go. So now everything should be working. We should be able to load the page, and it should still work. Okay, great. Now we have our application set up to handle WebSocket protocol requests. We can go ahead and add some things to our front end. So let's go ahead and jump into our index.html file. And we could put this in a separate file, but for this example, just to make it easier, I'm just going to add a script tag right here and put the code within the HTML. If you wanted to, you could create a static folder and set up our static URLs like we normally do for our Django projects. But for this example, just to keep it easy, I'm just going to put a script tag right here. So create a script tag, create a closing script tag, and we'll put our code in the middle. So first thing we do is create a new instance of a WebSocket. So do a var socket equals new WebSocket. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and just use ES6 for this. So we'll do just a const socket equals new WebSocket, and we'll pass in a string, and we'll pass in our WebSocket URL request, or the URL path for the request. So we'll do a ws : / and pass in local host : 8000, and in our routing here, we did ws/counter. So once again here, we'll do ws/counter, and you also need to put in these trailing slashes just to make sure you have those there on both the routing right here, trailing slash, as well as in our template here. Make sure you have those trailing slashes there. And you'll notice here that we put ws : / instead of HTTP. That's because we're using our WebSocket protocol instead of HTTP here. So make sure that is set up there as well. Now we have a socket. We can go ahead and we can do a socket.onMessage equals a function, and we'll pass in e for event, and we'll go ahead and write some code here to handle when it receives a message. So once it receives a message, we want to do a couple things. We want to parse the JSON. We're going to go ahead and log that to the console, and we're also going to go ahead and set this number ID, the value of this field right here, to be that number. So what we can do here is we can do we'll do a const data equals json.parse, and we'll do e.data. And we'll go ahead and do a console.log data. And we'll go ahead and finally, now we have logged to the console, let's go ahead and change this value here to be that number. So we'll go ahead and do a document.query selector, and we'll go ahead and pass in a string, and we'll put the # with number. Since we're using a query selector, we either put a pound or a period. If we're using a class, it'd be a period, but in this case, since it's an ID here, we want to go ahead and use a pound. So we'll put a # sign right there, and then number. And then at the end of this, we'll put a .inner text to change the inner text of this element, and we'll set that equal to data, and we'll do .message. Inside of our consumer here, we pass in a dictionary here with the key of message and the value of count. So we do the data.message, we're grabbing this key here, and whatever it's set to, in this case will be whatever number that we're on currently. So that's why we put data.message right there. And that should be it for our code. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll read on our server, and we'll try running this. And you'll see here, it counts up to 10. Let it go here for a second. And now it starts over to 1 and keeps counting. And we've jumped into our console here. You'll see it's logging the message each time. So that is it really for this little simple application. We just got a working Django Channels project. You'll see here it's not reloading the page at all. It's just updating it automatically for us without us doing anything. So this opens up a bunch of possibilities for future applications we could use. But for this example, this is all we're going to do, just so we have a working project, and hopefully this helped kind of build a basic understanding of how Django Channels works and how to set up a basic project. I'd like to create a lot more videos with this in the future. So if you have any ideas on what we could use for this, I have a couple, but if you have any, let me know, and I'll try to see if I can make a video at some point about those different projects. But yeah, that's really it. The code will be in the description below, as well as a link to the written tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.